Welcome to the Mental Health Multiverse.
We're your hosts,
HB
and LB.
We'll be breaking down some of our favorite movies and TV shows as they relate to mental health, self-healing, and overall wellness, while also breaking stigmas, shedding light on misinterpretations, and helping you understand yourself a little better.
If you're also on a healing journey and enjoy pop culture, stick around.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Mental Health Multiverse. I am HB, and I am not joined by my co-host LB today, but I am joined by a very special guest who we have had on the show before, Kathryn Allison. So welcome to MHM again, Kathryn.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Today we are talking about the Pixar movie Soul, but Kathryn was on our first season and talked to us all about Megara. And the reason that we had Kathryn on to talk about Megara is because when we were recording the episode, Kathryn was in a production of Hercules, which was very exciting. So a little brief, for those who don't know or don't remember, a little brief bio of Kathryn is that she is very famous. She's one of my most famous friends. She's
hardly.
I knew that would make you laugh. She's a sultry singer who released her debut album Something Real in 2019, and I have happened to have seen that performed live, which is very exciting. And back in 2014, she won New York Music Festival's Next Broadway Sensation, and 3 months later, she made her Broadway debut in Aladdin. Also very cool, very exciting. And Aladdin just had an anniversary, yes?
Yes, 10 years, which is wild. And they're doing a very special performance, I believe, this Thursday. So it's about to be a moment, apparently.
Oh, I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. And then you've also graced the Broadway stages of Wicked, and most recently the Tony-winning revival of Company, which you are now touring in the touring company of Company.
Yeah, across America. Come see us. It's super fun.
I have some cosplay friends who have seen you in their various cities in which they live, which is exciting.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, whenever I see someone post about going to see Company, I'm like, my friend's in that. My friend Kathryn, she's very famous. She's in that, actually.
Oh my God, I hope they all had a good time.
I believe so. I mean, I saw it. I unfortunately didn't get to see you in the role that you are in now. What is the role that you're in? What is her name?
Her name is Sarah, and
Sarah.
she does a lot of jujitsu in her scene. So it provides a
Yes.
very, I don't want to ruin anything else after that, but yeah. It's an exciting
It's a very
moment.
it's a physically taxing role, which I think is really cool. And I also think it's really special. Again, not to spoil Company for anyone who hasn't seen it, but I think it's really special that you specifically are playing that role like that to me.
Thank you.
I think a lot of people appreciate seeing you in that role. So
thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks. I'm trying not to blush.
That's okay. I'm going to cry for most of this episode. So listeners and Kathryn, be warned. This movie made me very emotional. It made me emotional the first time I saw it, but it made me especially emotional when I just rewatched it for the purposes of this podcast. And then LB, who couldn't be here with us today, messaged me a note to share with like the listeners about her experiences with the movie, and that made me cry. So I was like, great, everything is gonna make me cry. But before we get into our first experiences or anything, can I put you on the spot and ask you to do an abridged synopsis of Soul for us?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So Soul is about a man named Joe. He is a band teacher in New York City, and he's kind of lost his way in life. He had this dream of becoming a professional gigging pianist performer, and life has just not turned out in that way. So he ends up, my God, do I just give things away? I mean, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, this is your first, last, and only spoiler alert.
Yes.
If you have not watched this movie, please pause this episode, go watch it and then come back later because it will be very important for you to we can't talk about the plot of the movie without spoiling it because
Boiling.
something
Yeah.
happens at the very beginning of the movie that, if you haven't seen it, would ruin the entire rest of the
Entire
movie. So
100%.
so this has
Um,
been your warning. I'll give you 3 seconds. Pause and come back later if you have not seen it. Okay, ready? Go.
Great. Okay, so you've come back. So essentially, he gets a call from a former student of his, and he's like, "Hey, man, I'm playing with Dorothea, who's like an incredible saxophonist, and I think you should sit in with us for audition to sit in with us for playing tonight." So he goes, he does amazing, he gets the gig, but unfortunately, on his way to back to his apartment, he dies. He falls into a pothole and enters into this liminal space between the great beyond and the great before. Is that what they call it? The great before?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, he's distraught and he ends up meeting a soul in the great before who is having a very similar problem to him, that she can't really find her purpose and he's kind of lost his. And so it's kind of the story of how they're both finding that journey together, and they go through all of these different obstacles, and they both end up at the end of the movie finding not necessarily what their purpose is, but like the will of what living life is, like what
Yeah.
living is, if that makes sense.
No, totally. And I love the lost soul as depicted in the movie. Her name is 22, which I think is kind of funny.
Yes.
Just like because you hear, so essentially Joe, the main character, when he dies and ends up in this place, he is mistaken for a volunteer because all of the souls in the great beyond go to volunteer at the great before to like
Mm-hmm.
help the new souls find their spark and find what they
Mm-hmm.
will enjoy about living on Earth. And I think that's really cute. They like build personalities and they give all the little souls these like little indications of what their life,
Yeah.
who they will be when they are on Earth. And 22 has had all of these amazing mentors, such as Abraham Lincoln and Gandhi and Mother Teresa, and none of them could help her find
Mm-hmm.
her purpose. And so it's kind of like fate that Joe and 22 get matched together because at first they think they have a common interest, and it is that 22 does not ever want to live. She does not ever
Mm-hmm.
want to go to Earth. She'd rather just live her life in the great before. And Joe wants to get back to Earth. So they
Mm-hmm.
decide to like formulate this plan of, okay, so we're going to help you find your spark so that I can go back to Earth. And then one of the funniest parts of the movie is that there's these mystics of, oh gosh, what are they called?
Yeah.
The rogue souls are like the mystics of mystics without borders,
Yes.
and they help capture lost souls.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because it's just like people meditating or like people who are actually alive on Earth, but they
Yeah.
can like bring their souls to that place in
Yeah.
between, to the zone.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how Joe gets back to his body, but he doesn't get back to his body. 22 gets put in his body and Joe gets
Yes.
put in a cat.
Like a Freaky
So
Friday moment.
it is. It's like that's exactly what it is. So I have a really kind of like heavy question for you right
Okay.
off the bat. And I feel like this is something that is widely discussed amongst folks. But
Mm-hmm.
do you see, so I know Soul got a lot of hate, and I think I was one of the people who was giving it this hate for this reason in particular.
Okay.
Why does Disney like to turn their Black characters into non-humans for most of the movie? Like Princess and the Frog.
Yeah.
Now I rewatched
Yeah.
Soul and I did see, I was like, okay, he is on screen for most of the movie at least, unlike Princess and the Frog when Tiana's only at the beginning and the end. So
Yeah.
that get but that's kind of the question I wanted to open up with you. Like,
Man,
I don't
that's such a
know.
deep question. I mean, if I'm being real, like, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's a clearly racist trope that we've had to deal with in terms of like from the beginning of time in terms of the inception of America, right? Like Black people were not seen as human beings. And
Yeah.
I still think that's something that we're consistently fighting against in this capitalistic society that has been created, that our life doesn't have value at all. And we're not seen as valuable parts of society, of community. And so, do I think they've done it consciously? No, but do think it's done subconsciously? Yes, because that's the area that we're trying to work on. I think hopefully most people in society is learning and relearning so that subconsciously, right, we don't make those decisions again and again and again. But it's hard. I mean, that's what, over 200 years of struggle that we're trying
Yeah.
to accomplish that. It's not going to
Yeah.
happen overnight.
No, it's very true. And I like the thought of like, is it conscious or is it subconscious? And I think,
Mm-hmm.
in the case of Princess and the Frog, I think they were like, we finally want to create our Black princess. Like, let's finally do it. What's a good story? We can do that. Okay, let's use Princess and the Frog. Let's put her in the
Mm-hmm.
bayou. Let's do all of these things that do
Mm-hmm.
sort of represent that culture in a way, but then because of the plot, like it doesn't lend
We don't
itself
even get
to,
to see her, like,
yeah.
yeah.
And then with this movie, again, I think it is a beautiful representation of the of Black musicians and jazz,
Mm-hmm.
and like where and how a lot of musical influence comes from Black people.
Yeah.
And so I think like that section of the representation is wonderful. And then it's like, but we still had to go and make him a little blue creature for like part of the movie, and then a cat for the rest
Yeah.
of them. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Hopefully.
I do remember that it was getting a lot of criticism for that. And I think I just kind of jumped on the bandwagon and was like, yeah, stop doing this, Disney. And I didn't really give the movie a full chance.
Yeah, I think like when you said it, I was like, oh yeah, I do remember that happening. But I also, where it like, that's its kind of fatal flaw, it makes up in all of the beautiful conversations and three-dimensional characters of Black people that they have in the movie. Like the barber is one of my favorite characters. Like that
Yeah.
scene is always, I just love it so much. His mom, the people that are that work with his mom, I just, where it lacks in that area, it does make up in those other parts.
Yeah, it feels like a slice of life in a way, those moments. It's like they peeled away a wall and allowed you to see into what it's like to
Mm-hmm.
be in these environments. And that is
Mm-hmm.
really beautiful. Yeah, so thanks for answering that question right off the bat. I wanted to get it out of the way so we could talk about other stuff.
Yeah.
But do you remember your first experience seeing this movie? Do you remember any first initial reactions to it?
I don't.
Oh, it came out on Christmas in 2020. So it was December 25th, 2020. So it was like while everything was in lockdown, it was straight
Yeah.
to Disney Plus release, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I probably watched it at home with my parents. I remember really enjoying it. I remember the barber scene a lot that we just talked about. And yeah, and I do remember being like, no shade to La La Land, but I felt like I just remember La La Land, which is so different from this movie, but like claiming that like white people are saving jazz and like and so it was just nice to see a movie about jazz and Black people and about their love and passion for it and what happens when that gets lost and like how to reinvigorate it. I thought that was really exciting. Yeah, and I remember, I feel like watching Disney Plus maybe had some like behind the scenes and like hearing the creator talk about why the movie was so important to him. And yeah, so that's my first impression. I really loved it. I thought it was great.
Yeah, for anyone who hasn't seen the behind the scenes stuff, I don't know if it's still on Disney Plus. I do have at least one link I can put in the show notes that talk about like the design of like how
Yeah.
they made the fingers moving on the piano and like that sort of inspiration. It's all really, really cool stuff.
Yeah.
So I'll definitely link one of those things. But for me, my first time watching it, I was in at my apartment, probably by myself.
Mm.
I just remember like so like I said, my expectation of it was that I was going to be angry because of the backlash it had got. And I was like, this movie. So I hadn't watched it when it initially came out. The reason I watched it actually is because back in the lockdown or whatever we want to call it,
Hmm.
I was doing these makeup collaborations with people once a week. And we had themes that we would do our makeup on. And for our Pixar theme, I got Soul.
Mm.
And I was like, huh, I haven't seen that one. So I watched
Yeah.
it because I don't like to cosplay or do, pull inspiration from things if I don't actually know anything about them. So
Yeah.
I watched it. And I remember really, really feeling connected. Like I really remember the feeling, like especially because of where we were in life in I want to say I probably watched it in 2021. It probably was not
Mm.
2020, but still like very close to the sort of feelings of doubt in humanity and
Hmm.
like just like loneliness and sadness and isolation.
Hmm.
And the way that that is depicted in this movie is so visceral and so real and so clear that I like felt it in my soul and was like,
Hmm.
yeah, what am I doing with my life? Like, what's the point of living?
Hmm.
So I remember really, really having those feelings. And then when I watched it this time around for the purposes of this podcast, I felt like I related to it even more, especially
Hmm.
that feeling of, and we can talk about this specific part later, but like, I feel like we live in a culture and an age that allows people to be self-absorbed, if that makes sense. Like a lot of people have that main character energy
Hmm.
and are curating their lives on social media to look perfect and
Hmm.
all of that. And Joe's journey kind of reminded me about that of like, am I so self-absorbed that I'm not paying attention to the little things and the people in
Hmm.
my life who make life worth living, you know?
Hmm.
So that was my reaction to it watching it this time around.
Yeah.
Did you have any like new feelings or thoughts come up after watching for the purposes of this recording?
Yeah. I think so. Well, a couple of things. There's a point where he finishes his performance with Dorothea and he's like, I thought I would feel different. And she goes and tells this whole story about the fish and about, the fish like searching for the ocean. And I remember like distinctly when I finished my first performance of Aladdin, like I made my Broadway debut. It was everything that I had worked for my entire life had led up to that moment. And it came to the end and I was like, I don't feel any different. Like,
Yeah.
and that's such like a mind warping life. That sounds dramatic to say, but it is feels like kind of life altering because like you work so hard for something and then you get it and then you're like, why don't I feel I felt like my whole life was going to change now because of this and and it doesn't. So it was just interesting how they really captured that. And then also the in the zone moment, like the way I don't think I've ever when I first watched it the first time, I think I was like, I'm looking for a way to escape this horrible, lockdown situation that we're in. And so I don't think I probably focused as much as I probably should have watching the movie. But this time I was like, man, they captured that in the zone moment so perfectly because that's how it feels. That's how it feels for me, at least, when I get lost in the music, whether I'm playing with someone or I'm just practicing by myself. Like that is what it feels like. And it's so magical that they were able to capture that, whether that's through interviewing people. I want to know more about how they were able to express that. Like, who did you talk to? Because it's literally
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah, that was one of the questions I actually had for you was like, as an
Mm,
artist and performer, can you relate to getting in the zone? And do you like how they depicted it in the movie?
yeah, I loved how they depicted it because I feel like, I don't know, it can feel like you're floating a little bit once you get lost, and it's such a warm feeling, which I think they also capture. But it does kind of feel like an abyss sometimes. You're like, I'm floating, and it's like warm and magical, especially when you're collaborating with multiple people. It can feel otherworldly,
Yeah.
like you've lifted out of a space.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. And I also love the moment when 22 is like hitting people who are in the zone and then they like
Yes.
smack back into
Yes.
reality.
And I was like, is that what they're doing? Is that what they're doing? Stop doing that.
when I when I snap back into my head, yeah, because I haven't performed in a really long time, but like as a fitness instructor, like I kind of
Yeah.
get into the zone when I'm teaching too sometimes,
Yeah.
and there will be moments when I snap back into my head and I'm like, what was I? Where are we? Like what?
Yeah. What just happened?
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, some people say, like, I remember my teacher saying when I was, younger, like, a sign of a good performance is that you don't remember it after, that you were so
Mm,
deep within it that you come out and you're like, wow, what happened? Where am I? And I think there's a healthy medium of that, but I think that they express that pretty well.
yeah, I was gonna ask you about that next too, because the I don't remember his name. The little soul that looks like Shakespeare basically says the zone is enjoyable, but when that joy becomes an obsession, one becomes
Yes.
disconnected from life. Yeah, and I thought that was really powerful too. And I also like how they depicted that representation. It's both funny and also true as like
Yeah.
a finance bro. Like a finance bro is just
Yes.
like sitting at his desk and his soul is returned to his body and he's like, I'm alive.
Yeah. I gotta get out of here.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's
Um,
true for a lot of people. I feel like, again, I think that is the fault of a capitalistic society. We've been taught that once you either find your purpose, and if the purpose doesn't align with making enough money, then you got to figure out what that's going to be. And then you get obsessed about it because they've taught us to be obsessed about it. And then you realize your whole life has just been spent doing what,
yeah.
and for who, and for what. So
Mhm.
I do think a lot of people do have that like wake up moment. They're like, oh my gosh, what have I been doing with my life? And then switch. But how do you get there,
Yeah.
without the help of a
Yeah.
little 22?
Yeah. Well, I also like to connect a couple of dots that you're talking about too. I really like that the emphasis on this movie has is that life is made up of little moments.
Mm-hmm.
And we get so caught up in not only our dreams and our goals and our passions, but also just in the things we have to do to survive,
Mm-hmm.
especially if we are pursuing a career. Like I think it's really beautifully depicted in Joe as becoming a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And he very clearly has such a passion for music that
Mm-hmm.
sparks the other the children that he teaches, right?
Yes.
And as you said, like the person who calls him up and says, "Hey, come play with us," is a former student of his who
Mm-hmm.
was inspired by him. And I think Joe, and again, I think it's really beautifully depicted in the movie, but we see taking on outside jobs that aren't our passion, purpose, and goal
Mm-hmm.
as a failure sometimes or as like something negative.
Mm-hmm.
But look at the ripple effect he had and how many
Mm-hmm.
other people he got into jazz or into music and how he lights that up. Like, I was crying the very beginning scene when that girl is playing the trombone and she
Yes.
gets into the zone, and then all the kids laugh at her and he's like, "Why are you laughing at her? She was in the zone." And then he starts playing and then all the kids
Yeah.
get mesmerized by him. Like that, I was like, how
Yeah.
dare this movie start off like this? But I think like to bring it all first full circle, that's what the movie was trying to say is like those are the moments that are worth living for. Those little
Hmm.
moments when you inspired someone or you touched someone's heart in some way
Hmm.
or you had connection or you watched the sunset or you watched the rainfall or you took a breath of fresh air. Like it's these little things. And that's why sometimes when we reach the big goal is because we never enjoyed the process of getting there.
Yeah.
And then once you're there, you're like, I'm at the top of the mountain, but what was it all for? You know?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think that was said so beautifully, and I have like
Thank you.
nothing to add. I was like, yeah, yeah, she hit the nail on the head. Yeah.
Thank you. I also do believe we've kind of touched on this idea on the podcast before. So it's not the first time my brain has thought about it, but
Yeah.
I do think it is, I think it is portrayed in this movie in a really realistic and palatable way because I think a lot of
Hmm.
people, especially artists or people who have more creative endeavors, can relate to
Yes.
feeling like a failure. You know, as
Hmm.
me as a fitness professional, like I moved to New York to be an actor 12 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I really try very hard not to see my pivot in career as a failure and all the people who I have changed and touched and by being a fitness professional.
Hmm.
And I also still call myself an actor, even though I haven't been on stage in however long. But I try not to let the fact that, I haven't like officially had the job
Hmm.
doesn't mean I don't still have all the training, doesn't mean I still don't have all the
100%.
passion, like
Yep.
all of that, you know?
Hmm.
So so I like really, really related to Joe. And I think a lot of people can.
Yeah.
So LB unfortunately couldn't be on this recording, but she left
Hmm.
me a little note to read to our listeners about her experience with Soul. And I'm just going to warn y'all that the first time I read this, it did make me cry. So I might cry reading it again. I think it would be worse if she were here, but I think it's also weird when you're like reading a message that someone wrote you and they're right there. So, anyway, so LB says, Soul is definitely one of my all-time favorite movies, not just Pixar, not just animated, like of all time, because I can relate so much to finding a new appreciation for life after not wanting to live for so long. She said the last scene of him on the subway admiring the sunset always makes me bawl because that's exactly how I felt living in San Francisco and feeling really proud and grateful that I kept going and created such a life for myself. I just thought that's really beautiful
Yeah.
because I think a lot of people, and I'm not going to speak for LB at all because I do know her, but I would also like for her to be able to speak for herself. But
Hmm.
just as like a general umbrella, we do get a glimpse into Joe's relationship with his mother, right? And how she is a little hypercritical of him, and it is coming from a place of love. And she's just trying to protect him and give him security without really witnessing his passion and desire. And he does not feel seen or heard by her until that moment when he's having his suit tailored and 22 is in the body and 22 kind of blurts out a very disrespectful, I would say, message
Hmm.
to his mother. And Joe's like, oh no. But it sparks a really good conversation between the two of them. I think that that's a particularly really beautiful moment. But we go through life and it's so like some days are really hard.
Hmm.
And on
Hmm.
those days you have to find the little things to be grateful for.
Hmm. And the
And
things to,
go ahead, go
I
ahead.
was going to say, the things to anchor you and to tether you to your experience. I think sometimes life gets so hard that we avoid really realizing how we feel in the moment, and then it catches up with us at the end instead of taking the time to like really feel what we're feeling and be like, okay, now how can I, if I can't solve it in this moment, what's going to either make me feel better, or how can I work through it so that I can get to the thing that I really want to do or be or whatever. Does that mean that I have to sit down with a friend? Does that mean that I need to maybe go watch a movie and just, process for a second, write in a journal, sit outside? I think
Yeah.
that's a big, sometimes a part of our society that's missing, is that we want to go, 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 go. And then we, that scene that 22 like puts his hand on that magical machine, and like his life pops up and he sees this like exhibition, and that's what we're talking about, right? Like he slowly is realizing that maybe he hasn't really, that he's thought that he's on the way to his purpose, his penultimate moment, but he hasn't really sat with himself and seen what, I don't know.
Well, I think that scene too, like to tie it also into when he was talking to his mom, he saw that montage of his life.
Yes.
And what he took away from it was, if I die today, my life would have amounted to nothing.
Right.
And like that is so hard, but it's also not true, right? Because we see the ways that he affected people, but he never saw
Yes.
those.
Yeah.
Right? Like he was not paying attention. He wasn't being present. He was always focused on the next big thing, which is what society is teaching us to do, right? Society is telling us the next big thing, the next big thing, your next goal, your next this, the next moment.
Right.
And it's very, very hard to live in the present these days. And I think that's also kind of a cool little allegory for the souls that do come and help the lost souls, because a way to practice being present is to practice meditation and slow breathing and like getting in the zone, right? And those are very clear depictions, or like very clear activities that help you stay more present. So I think it's funny that when they say like, oh, I'm meditating, and then one guy's version of meditating is spinning a sign around in New York City, but like, because meditation is not the only way to stay grounded and stay present, but it is a way. So I think that's a cute little connection there. But again, to like tie it all together, Joe saw that montage of his life, looked back on it, and the reason that none of those little moments were in his montage from his life is because he never took the time to actually process and feel and accept any of the actual little good things that were happening to him or for him throughout. And like, even when, I think this is a really special scene too, it's when I don't remember her name, but the little girl who plays the trombone.
Yes.
And she comes to quit. And Joe is so hyper focused on getting back into his body that he doesn't even care that this little girl is about to quit playing trombone. And that moment is when 22 sort of realizes like, oh, she loves this. Like, why does she want to quit? Why would you ever want to stop doing something that you loved? And Joe is so like one track mind focused that he didn't even really process or notice that she cared, And it's like those little things throughout his life that we kind of, I think it's like teaching us to pay attention to. It's like he was whether he realizes it or not, the reason that she stuck with it. And so yeah, I think I've said this like about 100 different ways, but what I'm trying to say in a very concise way is that his life montage would have looked completely differently if he looked at life differently.
Indeed.
And he would have seen those moments in his classroom, or he would have seen, and I think they do flashbacks at the end of the movie where you do see him like give the drumsticks to the boy who ends up being the one who calls him, and like playing music for his class, and like all the ways he did inspire others. And it's like, yeah, those are the moments that could have been in that montage if you
Yep.
would have just paid attention to them. So anyway,
Yeah.
that's what I was trying to say. Took me a really long time, but we got there.
Nah.
I think we've touched on so many of the themes already. One thing that I kind of want to talk to you about is like, is there a difference in your opinion, or like,
Mm.
do you think that the movie makes it so, between purpose, passion, and your spark?
Hmm. I think there is a difference between the three. I think sometimes it can get conflated now that I'm thinking about it. Because, your life's purpose may lead you to, your passion may lead you to your purpose, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like your passion, I don't know, could be dancing, but you realize that your purpose is, you learn about maybe occupational therapy and you're like, wow, I can help a dancer heal. Like that,
Mm.
it's just interesting. And that sparks you being like, oh, I want to teach other people how to do that because I want to make sure that they encounter a problem that I've been able to teach someone how to successfully create a healthy dancer in terms of how they move their body and making sure it flows correctly, right? So I think in those ways, they can all inform each other. And I
Mm.
think in terms of a spark, I think you can have passion, you can have purpose, but like the spark can be dimmed with outside yourself if you get frustrated, or maybe someone is telling
Like
you
doubting
maybe
you.
this, downing you. Yeah. So I think that can be diminished. And watching 22's spark kind of grow over the course of the movie, because she has been kind of being doubted. Like, you can't do this. Like, you're not. I don't know. I also am thinking a lot about the musical that I'm in right now, and like the penultimate song is called "Being Alive," and
Mhm. It fits.
it fits, like in this roundabout way, but kind of just what you have to kind of, people in life will continue, for whatever reason, can doubt your ability, can kind of make you feel less than. But you have to find at some point either someone or yourself to believe in yourself to kind of bring that spark back to life. And that can be hard. But again, I think it's finding it in those little things and what keeps you going and grounded. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I like that you said that, because I feel like, the saying that people have about like what wakes you up and what gets you out of bed in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't always have to be that big passion and purpose that
Yes.
gets you out of bed every day. It can just be, I'm excited to get out of bed today because I'm recording an interview with one of my friends. Like, that's
Yeah.
exciting. And like, maybe that is connected to my passion and my purpose because I do this podcast for a reason, right?
Yeah.
But that bigger, greater purpose is not why I was excited to do this interview with you, right? Like,
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I think
and
that's even one of the few things that's getting me through this tour. Changing cities every week can be a little exhausting, but it's like, oh, I'm excited today to get up and go walk along the river and see the trees, even if it's not connected to what I'm doing every single night. It's those little things that like gets you ready and invigorates you for the day or your life, really.
yeah, I love that. And I think another big theme of the movie that we've kind of touched on a little bit is living life to its fullest,
Mhm.
and just like how how can we do that? Like, I think everyone has a different idea of what living life to the fullest means.
Mhm.
But I do really like how this movie kind of tries to ground us and say it's more than just about you as an
Mhm.
individual, and it's about the other people in your life who either you inspire or who inspire you, or connection, that kind of thing. To bring it back to the scene in the barber shop,
Mhm.
like, the when Joe leaves, I can't remember the exact line. It's like, I didn't know, I've never heard you've never told me that before. And then he like
Yeah,
kind of says, well, you never
or
asked.
asked.
And I thought that was really powerful. And a little personal information about me right now. I'm reading a book called Calling in the One, and it's like about
Hmm.
love. And I'm not trying to look at it as like, by the end of this book, I'm going to have a partner. That's not what I'm looking. I'm just kind of like trying to open my heart up to new things.
Hmm.
But one of the things the book has the reader do, which I have immensely enjoyed, is to open your mind up to every single interaction you have,
Mm.
especially living in New York. It's very, what's the word I'm looking for? People here are very closed off, and we don't say good morning or hello, or we don't talk to the cashier at checkout. That kind of, it's very much like
Hmm.
I'm doing my business, I'm on my way. But the book is asking of the reader to connect with in some way, make a connection with every human you interact with, and see them as not just what their functional purpose is, like the doorman of a building or the
Hmm.
cashier at a grocery store, but see them as a human being.
Hmm.
And that has immensely changed the way that I interact with people, because I do think, especially in our society, but especially in New York, we
Hmm.
are really just kind of taught that like you just walk past or you just keep your head down. I think there
Hmm.
are, like like in the Midwest where I grew up, we talked to
Yeah.
the cashier all the time, but it's just different here. And and I kind of got that same message from this movie, is like your barber is not just your barber, and he's not just there to listen to all your problems, you know?
Hmm.
And if you want to make a true, genuine connection with someone, you got to ask them questions about themselves too.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it also even links back to his mom because I don't think his mother asked those questions of him. Like she only had those ideas of what happened in the past and what she doesn't want to happen in the future, rather than
Yeah.
really asking and questioning him about what do you actually feel about this? Why are
Yeah.
you so passionate about this? Why is it this that keeps you getting up in the morning every day, you know? And again, because 22 blurted out something so incredibly rude, that was the only way they were able to have an honest conversation about it. Probably one that they
Yeah.
should have had a really long time ago.
Yeah. But he approached from a place of, I want to say, both respect and also fear. It's like,
Yes. Yeah. As anyone would be like coming to your mother to be like,
yeah, exactly. Um, no, I love that point. I think it's a really valid point that it was like learned behavior in some way too.
yeah.
It's like part his obsession with his goal and his dream, and also not ever having that modeled to him as well. And speaking of that, I think another theme of this movie is dreams and goals versus obsession. I like that
Mm.
that's a sort of theme too that we've kind of talked about a little, but how when you do get so obsessed over a goal or a dream that you have, that it takes over your life. And that's how the movie describes it, is when you become a lost soul,
Hmm.
is that obsession. Have you ever had like a goal or a dream that has become an obsession for you, or do you feel like you've kind of always been able to have a balance?
I mean, I don't want to say making my Broadway debut was an obsession, but it kind of was. I mean, I think it was everything that I spent so many hours a week studying from middle school throughout college, when I graduated college, that it was my entire life and I didn't make time for any other relationships, whether romantic, friendship wise. I probably should have been more invested in those relationships as well. And I think because of that, a part of my life that should have been more flourished suffered. And it's something that I'm still working to regain because I spent so much time doing that. And that's hard to admit, that's hard to admit that I focused so much of my time and attention and then other areas of my life that I would love to have more focused on have kind of dwindled away. So I think that is the cause of that. The downturn of that can be out of an obsession, which is similar to Joe, I feel like.
Yeah, no. And I do think I'm assuming you went to, well, actually, I don't know. Did you go to theater school, like college?
I did. Yeah.
I have a bachelor's degree in theater. We were taught that if you want to be successful in theater, because it is a very cutthroat industry, and or acting in general, but wherever you go, that you have to be obsessed.
Yeah.
And that if it is not your obsession, you will go nowhere because the people who are successful are the ones who are obsessed.
We were being taught that like in theater school, that being obsessed means you're going to accomplish the thing.
Yeah. I think it's the same with like business school. I think it's the same in the fitness industry. Like if you're not obsessed with your goals, you're never going to achieve them. And I think that you have to be able to find a balance in all of it. And that's what I personally work with my clients with, like specifically in terms of fitness, right? Because there was a point in my life where I was obsessed with, trigger warning, losing weight. And because of that obsession, I did it, but it was not sustainable by any means. It was my only focus for about a year and a half, 2 years of my life. And when I stopped obsessing over it because I wanted to be able to let go, I wanted to be able to live my life, I gained my weight back. And I've never seen it. Well, actually, that's a lie. At first, I saw it as a failure on my part, right? I have since come to terms with the fact that it was not a failure. It was actually a great success because now I am living my life. I'm able to focus on other things and it's no longer about what my body looks like. And that is incredibly freeing for me. But I think it can be the same regardless of what it is that your goal is. And like, no, I never felt any different when I stepped on that scale and saw the only thing it did was give me a little bit of serotonin for a moment.
Right. Yeah.
Because it's a temporary high, right?
Yep.
Like, Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do think that it is innately taught to us that in order to be successful, you have to obsess over the thing that you are trying to achieve. And I think it is so normalized to be that way. I think especially for men, I think it's like men go to work and they obsess over their jobs, women stay at home and obsess over their children. And I think it's a very, like, because of the heteronormative sort of society that we live in, those are the quote unquote expectations of life. But that doesn't, that you get to make your own life. It doesn't have to look like that. And it shouldn't look like that.
No, it shouldn't. I think it's detrimental, I believe personally. Don't do it. Don't do what we did.
Don't do what we did. Yeah.
Don't do it.
Or like learn, or if you do, learn from your mistakes, right? Like we did also. Yeah. And I just think it's so special that, you know, when 22 is walking around in literally in Joe's shoes, and does start having the moments of like, hey, I think I want to live. Like, I think I want to come to Earth and live a life. I love that the line that she uses is sort of like regular old living. Or maybe that's what he says. I can't remember which one of them says
it, but
it's like,
yeah.
Yeah, because he's sort of like, that's not your spark. That's just regular old living. But then later, as he's reflecting, he realizes that like regular old living is what makes life wonderful. those little things, little moments. Yeah.
I just think it's a really beautiful movie. I particularly love at the end when he's composing that new piece of music and he's looking at all of the little things that 22 has collected and how it just like zooms out macroly and you see like
Mm,
all of New York City lit up at night and then you see it even further from space and then you see kind of the Milky Way and he gets just a broader perspective
mhm.
and I don't know, I think it's a beautiful way to it's like kind of before the final act of the movie it's kind of a lesson to all of us to maybe just zoom out a little bit and look at your life from above and appreciate it for what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really beautiful. Do you have a favorite character? I personally am a fan of all the Jerrys.
The Jerrys are so good. I do love the Jerrys. I do love like the just the little souls. All of those little souls are so freaking cute.
The way they just like bounce around and
Yeah.
like when 22 is a lost soul and is kind of like trudging around the great before and like smacks all the little souls and they just like float in the air and they're like
And like yeah, like they just have such like a pure fondness for living in the moment that I need to
oh
like take more into my spirit.
yeah. No, I love it. I love it. Yeah, I have in my notes also that like the souls from the before are just absolutely adorable, like so
Yeah, they're
cute.
so cute.
I love the one that's like getting its personalities and it's like, I'm a megalomaniac.
Yeah, yes. Like this one's gonna be a doozy. Have fun with her.
That's Earth's problem. Yeah.
Yeah. So funny.
I have the direct quote somewhere, but I'll find it one day. I'll find it later. There's a scene where 22 is looking around and kind of like discovering that life is worth living. It
Mhm.
really, I know that obviously Soul came out first, but because I'm obsessed with the Barbie movie, it reminded me of that scene in the Barbie movie where Barbie's looking around and sees all the
Yeah.
couples talking and sees the old woman and like
Hmm.
those seem simpatico to me, like very, very similar
Hmm.
moments of realizing, oh, life isn't so bad after all.
Yeah.
Okay. And before we go, okay, rapid fire. Any favorite quotes or themes or scenes that you would like to share?
I love the fish story. I can't quote it word for word, but I love that story in particular. What else? The barber. I mean, I talked about it so much, but I just love the barber. And also the fact that like they're all really engrossed in this story that 22 is telling about like the afterlife and how we're all intertwined together and how absorbed everybody in the shop is of
Hmm,
this
hmm.
story um, is also a very lovely moment that I adore. And when he comes back into the shop and he's like, "You have to kiss the one of his aunts in the shop that's working there." But like 22 takes it literally, like kissing her on the lips. And she's
So funny.
that was yeah, funny. Anyway,
Yeah.
but yeah,
No,
those are
in the in the barber scene, in the barbershop scene after 22 goes on that spiel about the universe or whatever, the guy's
mhm.
like, I want one of those lollies. Like, what's it?
What is in that?
Yeah. I thought that was so funny. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think this movie, I think it's incredibly underrated. I understand why people criticized it when it came out. I think that there is in terms of upholding Disney, Pixar, the people in charge, the people that be, the people who make these movies, holding them to a higher standard of creating like, yes, we love this character and yes, we want stories like this, but we would absolutely love for our Black characters to not be changed into other beings
Yeah.
or
At least
objects or yeah,
yeah. Give us at least one. Just one, please.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it's like, I think it's a moment, as LB would say, it's a moment of both and, where it's like you can appreciate this for what it is. Like you said at the
Hmm.
very top, it's such beautiful representation. And you can also criticize the creators and say, but next time let's do better.
Hmm. Agreed.
Uh, and again, LB, I'm sorry you can't be here, but we are glad that you are here on this earth because
Yes.
that note made me cry a lot. So I am glad that you are here. And Kathryn, I am glad that you are here. And I'm
Thank you.
glad that you came on and shared your insight with us for this episode. And thank you, all the listeners, so much for listening. We will chat next time for our next Disney slash Pixar self-reflective animation story. So bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Mental Health Multiverse podcast and for spending time with us, HB and LB. Special shout out to our musical composer, Little HB.
If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, feel free to share it with others, post about it on social media, leave a rating and review, or become an exclusive Patreon member to see bonus and additional content.
To stay up to date on all things MHM, you can follow us on Instagram at Heather Bodie and at littlebit_notbroken, or subscribe to our YouTube channel to see our faces and watch some fun bloopers. You can find all of these links in the show notes.
Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.